So hello everyone, we're back this week and we're looking at Cease and Desist expansion, which has the Astronauts, Ignobles, Changerbots and Star Roamers. So let's just jump straight into it, shall we? So for the first pairing we've got Space Knight up against Hostage Exchange from Ignobles.
Ooh.
So who wants to kick us off on this then, shall we? Luke, have you got anything you want to say about Astronauts?
Yeah, I'm an astronaut fan. I like how they're all unique. I think some of their parts is greater than the individual.
That's really interesting actually. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think they've got some unique minions. I like that there's no repeats. I think they're an interesting faction and they play well with a lot of things. And I think Space Knight is their best card of them all. I think this was my number one seed going into them. Deck manipulation is fairly rare, I'd say, in this game, but it's so powerful. Being able to look at your cards every time and replace them in the order you want. It doesn't matter sometimes, but if there isn't any actions in there, you get to decide which next two cards you want to come out. Speeding up your turn, speeding up your draw. I think that's very powerful. It's one of those cards that you want to have out to rely on this. So the 5 power isn't as useful, but when you're ready to break the base, it's worth doing. I don't really like the Ignobles. I think they were a nice experiment, but ultimately difficult to play and not very worth it. You're giving away a lot of control for not much gain. So Space Knight is my very easy walkover, but anything would have beaten an Ignoble at this point.
Yeah, for what you say, Luke, all of my friends that I trust play Ignobles, and that means I really like them. So, yeah, absolutely. Like a superhero. Anyway.
Well, I'm one of your main friends, and I don't like them.
I'm another one, I think, and I really rate the Ignobles, so actually, I agree with you on that.
I like the fact that they're so quirky, and when I've paired them with, I know we were talking quite highly about dragons in the last video, and I have paired them with dragons, and I like to try and I almost think that they were sort of designed with that kind of pairing in mind. You know, the whole rip-off of Game of Thrones anyway, the whole sort of Dragons and Nobles experiment that's going on. So it was an interesting faction to play, but Hostage Exchange is just a horrible card. I mean, I don't even know how. Well, I do know how it's made it into the top two because there's just some horrible cards in the Nobles faction. I think the thing is they work so well as their own gimmick, but as far as this series goes, when we're talking about the best cards in Smash Up, it's exceedingly difficult to get a really good card from a faction that basically relies on its own gimmick so heavily to win out anywhere else. And that's why I think Space Knight is the better card in this example. Not because Space Knight's particularly good, as we'll talk about a number of cards in this particular set. I actually preferred Space Prince to Space Knight in terms of my rankings, but the talent is nice. It's nice that it's a talent. It's nice that it's not single use, but it's not something that we were talking about some King Minions last game that we were talking about wanting to keep them around all game long, wanting to keep them on the board for as long as we physically can. Space Knight, if it's a power 5 minion that you use to break a base, you don't really care. The fact that it's gone means it's gone. All right, fair enough. I don't get a chance to look at my top 3 cards, and I know that revealing them, looking at them, drawing that action is nice. You get to see kind of what you're going to get in your next draw or at the end of your turn draw. You can kind of predict or sort of formulate a bit of a plan moving forward. But to be perfectly honest, it's winning because Hostage Exchange. I mean, the simple fact that you're governed by the fact that the same power as another minion means that you've got to give something away that's really good to get something that could be as good, if not worse. I mean, and only for as long as it takes to really break a base, being that it's on the same. It's not the same base as it's control, everything is equal power less, so it doesn't have to necessarily be the same base. And I know that, again, it synergizes okay with the power 5 in the Noble set, so, but still, the Space Knight is a better card. One for one.
I mean, I really like playing the Ignobles. I think they are a very good faction. they're incredibly context specific. So obviously we talked earlier about the series that we're doing here in terms of the best card. Most of the Nobles cards are very, very good in that specific faction, but they don't translate well across into other factions. This is one of the few cards that could go into another faction because it's, although this card is better in the Ignobles because you can give away control of a minion and then immediately take it back and you get their minion, you can't do that if this card was in another faction, but the effect is still really strong, so you could just give them something that's not particularly good and then get a really good minion in return. So you could give them maybe a power 4 of your partner faction and then take the Archmage, for instance, and have Archmage for a long time. So it's got a very strong potential effect here with Hostage Exchange. But as you say, they're incredibly faction context specific, whereas Space Knight, you know, we talked before about draw and how good draw is, and you know, you draw through to your best cards. Unfortunately, this card is just for actions. It'd be really good if it's just look at the top 3, draw any card, take any card. That would be amazing. But obviously, Astro Knights, they really like their actions. That's what they're all about, is buffing up the power of your minions with their actions. So I mean, I'd give it to Space Knight, but I do think Hostage Exchange is one of those cards that could translate into another faction, and it does have a very, very strong potential to actually be a really swingy card, especially in that faction, but also in any other faction as well.
To me, there's 2 changes I'd make, and you mentioned one of them there, Mark. Exactly what I was going to say. If you change the Space Knight to be draw 1 and then place the other 2 back in any order, I think that would make the Space Knight much more powerful. And if you change the Hostage Exchange to just say printed power, so control any minion of printed power, equal or less, I feel like that would make that card an awful lot more powerful, an awful lot more usable, a lot more intriguing that you'd want to kind of play with that, because you have access to things like mimics, or imagine what we've been talking about before, where you've had the pirates that you can buff up, and other things that you might have buffed a Spartan through the eyeballs, and actually a Hostage Exchange it would scare people off trying to build a tactic like that, and I think that would make that a lot more desirable. I was just a bit disappointed that I guess they've not done it because it would make it absolutely super duper powerful, but it would make it a really intriguing card to play, and I think it would make things a bit more interesting.
I think I would say on the Nobles cards, I think the how difficult they are to play and their kind of the thing that they do, their characteristic, I think puts a lot of people off, and I think they get a lot of unfair hate because of that. I think people might play them once, they tank in the game or they do absolutely dreadful, and then they'll never play Nobles again and just call them a garbage faction. I think they do get a lot of hate for that. I think they need a lot of play, and you need to play them quite a lot with and work out what the good pairings are. But I think once you get the core mechanisms down to a T, I think they are a very kind of fluid faction. They do give you a lot of extra plays, a lot of card draw, and when you get both Feet of the King out into play as well, you're giving away minions, but for no downside, you get them straight back at the end of your turn. So I think they do have a lot of upsides, and they are a lot stronger than people give them credit for. But as I say, I think they get a lot of hate just because of their kind of gimmick, and I don't necessarily think that's overly fair.
Well, let's put it this way: they're better than superheroes. So.
I mean, I would definitely agree with you there. In fairness, I think they're.
Don't think it's a satisfying mechanic. I think playing extra cards, doing extra things, destroying stuff, all have satisfaction to them. They all feel like you're moving forward. Giving away things, okay, with a plan to take it back later, but giving away things doesn't feel satisfying. Even if you do take it back later, it's still not that satisfying.
I think it's clever. I think it is clever in the way that it works, but it relies, again, the fear of it is that it relies on other people not getting rid of that card somehow, and that can be a bit scary.
Yeah, and I think on the Space Knight, I think the fact that, I mean, it's a win for Space Knight for me, but I think because it's 3 cards, and because, as we talked about before, your actions make up half your deck, the fact that you're looking at 3 of them means you're very likely actually to hit at least one action, whereas if it was look at your top 2 cards, you've probably got, well, in theory, let's just say 50-50, whereas if it's top 3 and you're looking at for any actions, you've probably got a greater than 50% chance, at least on your first few, depending on how many actions you've drawn and played already in the game, but you've got a decent chance of drawing quite a lot of cards with Space Knight. What I would say, though, is it doesn't synergize very well with Mana's Bot. the power 2 minion for Astro Knights, where you look at your top card and if it's an action you draw it, they have a very similar effect, and I don't necessarily think that. I think they probably could have done something a little bit different with Mana Spot or with this card, but I think for me it's definitely Space Knight.
Yeah, but there's also, looking at it in the same way, the chance of drawing 2 actions per turn.
Well, yeah,
The more actions you draw through, the more minions you can draw through at the end of your turn.
If you
I think, while you're right, they don't synergize particularly well, you could have a turn where you draw nothing from it, but you could have a turn where you draw 2 cards at a time. So I think it's risk reward, and the more actions you draw out, the more chance you've got of drawing into your minions that you want. So I think it speeds up going through your deck, and that can never not be a good thing.
Save some of this stuff at the final.
Well, I'm with Space Knight as well, because you look at top 3. If, let's say, as you say, there's 2 actions in your top 3, you draw 1 with Space Knight, you then can return the rest in any order, so you put the action to the top and then you play the Mana Spot to draw it immediately.
Yeah.
So you kind of get a little bit of internal self-synergy, but for me it's Space Knight.
Yep.
Both agree? Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep.
Although I do think, as I say, Hostage Exchange is better than people might give it credit for.
Better within its own faction. Outside of that, it has very little, if any, use.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, next up we've got Solar Shout, and I think we all agreed this was the number 1 seed for Change of Bots and Port Me Up for Star Roamers. Now, I didn't put Port Me Up at all in any of my top 3, so do one of you guys want to say why you put Port Me Up in your kind of top 2?
Yeah, sure. To me, it's the special. Again, we talked before about the fact that I really enjoy the idea of keeping a minion around for a little bit longer. And we're looking for a card that is the best card in the deck. And to me, any card that lets me maintain or keep some of my other better minions around for any time longer, particularly after a base is scored, to me that is a card that is worth talking about in terms of the best cards. In terms of which one I prefer out of these 2, there you go. Careful there, Matt. In terms of which one I prefer out of these 2, I think it's probably Solar Shout. I would say it's pretty close in terms of which one of these that I like. I'm going to say Solar Shout, I think, for mine, because it gives me that chance to play an extra action. And that's an extra 50% of your game, as we've talked about. And the fact that it's a talent means that you can sort of multiply that over and over again. You could, we've got a couple of Solar Shouts in the deck. You could potentially strand one if you really wanted to and kind of play it through. For reasons that we've talked an awful lot about in previous. But I think the idea that you get to play extra actions is probably going to, in the longer run, be a bit more useful to you than returning one of your minions back to your hand. You start to go through the fact of playing that again. It takes a minion play next turn round, and unless you've got some sort of fancy way of being able to keep him out. But I think, to me, it's Solar Shout. But I think we're getting to a point already after one discussion where neither of these cards would make a deck of the best cards in Smash Up as far as if I was building one.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I don't think either of these cards would make. Well, I mean, I've made my All-Star faction for a deck, and neither of them did make it. But I mean, you could say that one of them arguably did, because Solar Shout is just a slightly worse Archmage. Although you do have 2 copies of Solar Shout compared to the 1 Archmage for the Wizards, and on for all effects and purposes, it is just Archmage, just basically with a power reduction slapped on it. And we talked about how good Archmage actually is, and Archmage is a very, very good card. So being able to increase the number of action plays per turn, every single turn, potentially even more than that if you have both Solar Shouts out, is incredibly strong. I will give credit to Port Me Up, because you mentioned about having to replay the minion again from hand isn't necessarily as good unless it's got a good on-play ability, which you might want to play, like if it's an Invader, for instance. So if you think about it for an Invader, then it's much better to have it to hand and then play it again. But the Star Roamers do have that way of being able to keep it in play. So if you've got your first mate up there, which is jacked up already, Port Me Up if you play Port Me Up, you can then use, I think it's the ship's engineer, to move. What it does, I think, is when a whiplash maneuver is another card that they have as well, where you can, if it would return to your hand, you can move it to another base instead. So
Yeah.
it's like a 2-card combo where you can Port Me Up and then slide it to another base to then try and break that base as well. So
I was thinking
yeah,
sort of building your own version of the first mate as you're kind of going through. I think it's that the £3 menu, isn't it, where they've got that talent in there. But I know what you mean. It allows for that sort of unique sort of play, and I like that as a style. The fact that it's a special, you can play it after the base scores, you get the benefit of the card both times, and that to me makes it quite valuable. But I do think that, like you say, the Solar Shout is a well put. It's just an Archmage with a power burn on there. Yeah, I think it's a Solar Shout for me.
Luke.
So did you decide Solar Shout as well, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I'd give it to Solar Shout. I think Port Me Up is good, and it's even better in the Star Roamers faction because you do have the option to move the minion to another base instead of actually returning it to your hand. That could be a good or a bad thing, depending on what the minion is. But I think Solar Shout is definitely the better card just because of the ongoing value that it gives you. As we've said, it is just an Archmage with a slight power reduction on the talent.
I was going to go for Port Me Up.
All right.
But I've lost this battle. I can't resist a situation where I break a brace and keep something behind that's really valuable. Imagine if you had an Eliza's out. I know this will appeal to you, Mark. You've got your Eliza out. The opponent thinks they've finally got rid of her. They can start playing some cards, and you just take her back up, play her back down again. And I just can't resist that satisfying play of re-putting down my power 5, my powerful minion, anything with a strong on-play action, like you said. You get to use that twice. It's fantastic, and I can't resist that dream scenario of being able to do it twice. So I would have voted for Pop Me Up, but I've lost this one.
On the flip side, though, Luke, if you think about someone like the Changer Bots with something like the Musketeers, where you get to play an extra action through Solar Shout, say he's on a different base somewhere else, and then you play a Musketeer action that allows you to play extra actions and chain some sort of ridiculously huge action chain where you just absolutely bang up one minion to 18 power and storm a base. And that was all because you get a chance to play an additional action, because they've all got you may play another action if it directly affects a minion on this base or what have you, kind of chain to it. I think you can get the same effect, if not better, from something like a Solar Shout. But I completely agree with what you're saying, though. I love the idea of that minion that's really annoyed everybody, like the Eliza play, for example, being able to whip that straight back in. I think that's a fantastic idea. That kind of trolling is wonderful. It's the sort of thing that you see when you play Viking Super Spies. But with the Solar Shout, to me, I think it takes it based on the additional part of the game. And again, it's all about the pairings, isn't it? But looking at the individual actions of the card, I think having the ability to play an extra action every single turn and only really losing 2 power for it, it's like Mark said, it's an Archmage, a free Archmage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think Solar Shout's good, don't get me wrong. I do like the extra action.
I'm saying good, I'm saying better.
Okay. I won't be upset if Solar Shout goes through. But my problem with Solar Shout is that whenever I played the Changer Boss, I've been sat on a load of actions that I couldn't care less about using. And it depends what you pair it with. If you pair it with something that's got good actions, then fine, it helps you use that. But then you might as well play the Wizards, because ways to play actions and extra minions and loads of extra things. So I've played Solar Shout and I've gone, I don't really want to play any of these extra actions. I've experienced that, and that maybe sticks in my memory a bit too much. Solar Shout is good because in some instances, going down to power 2 until the end of your turn can work out better for you. So I don't think that's necessarily enough downside to stop it just being the Archmage, like you said, because it expires as soon as you finish, so it only doesn't help you out, really, if you're going to break a brace, which is sort of not the point of it. So I think it's absolutely fine. It's a bit of a pain to constantly track whether it's on -2 or not and take it off all the time, but I prefer Pop Me Up, but I'm not sad for Solar Shout if it goes through.
Yeah, the Changer Bots are a perfect example of why the game needs minus power counters as well as plus power counters. because they have a lot of power reduction, and keeping track of it can be pretty tricky, especially when you're reducing power, but then you're increasing power again with like Leader 2 and some of the other cards they've got. So yeah, it's a perfect example of why it needs minus power reductions. Hopefully someday we'll get them. But yeah, I mean, I like Port Me Up, and I think Port Me Up would have won it for me against some of the other cards that we've got in the first round pairings. But I think, as I say, it's just Solar Shout is just Archmage, just dressed up in a fancy metal armor suit. So I think when you think about it like that, as it's just an Archmage, we talked about how strong Archmage is. Most factions have good actions. I know you talked there about depending on the pairing, but a lot of factions have good actions. There aren't that many factions that have some absolute stinkers, and no doubt we'll do a worst card in Smash Up where we'll have quite a few of those actions come in, like Smoke Bomb and Tooth and Claw and Guns. But yeah, for me, it's Solar Shout, and I get what you're saying about Port Me Up, and especially in Star Roamers as well, where they do have that mechanic where instead of returning it to hand, they can move it instead. It does have that little bit of extra versatility, but it's Solar Shout for me.
Right.
Okay, Lee. Yeah.
After that, plus it looks like Starscream, who was my favourite Transformer. So
It's a cool design. I do like the sort of mundane objects transform into Transformers. The paper transforms to the paper airplane, and then the paper airplane transforms to the Solar Shout.
Well, yeah, it's an RV. Leader 2 is just transforms into like an RV. I've never seen Transformers, but I think they've done it's quite funny what they've done with this faction.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So on the big side. So for those who've seen Game of Thrones, this is I think, to be honest, I think on all four of these factions they've done a great job in terms of spoofing them. But I mean, this is the iconic moment of Game of Thrones in this card right here, up against Leader 2 for the Changer Bots. So who wants to see Red Birthday Party go through?
Me.
Okay, let's hear it then, Lee.
Me first.
Yeah, if you're going to go for Red Birthday Party, let's hear why it should go through.
I mean, I love the explosive play that you get from this. The fact that, especially if you're playing against a Swarm faction or something, and there's plenty of them in the game, where you're able to take a powerful minion that you might not necessarily care about. Let's say, for example, you've paired even these two factions together. You smash these two up, and you're playing Leader 2. You've got a Leader 2 down on the base, and you whip down a Red Birthday Party. Oh my god, you're just destroying everything that's there. It's just fantastic. I just love that completely destructive nature of the whole game. Even better if, I mean, presumably destroy a minion you own. The goal would be to steal one of their minions, swap for one of yours somehow, through one of the other sort of manipulations of the deck. You play down a Red Birthday Party, sacrifice the minion that you've just stolen off the other player to kill all the rest of their minions and any other minions there with less power, and then you play something Hand of the King or whatever to get back the minion that you gave away in the first place. I think that's just a wonderful. I know you were talking earlier on, Luke, about the satisfaction of giving and taking. To me, that's where the satisfaction is. You just imagine the play, and I can see it right now. Just the whole wonder nature of stealing something like a Leader 2 from somebody, binning that off and binning off absolutely everything else that's on that base, and then nicking back the 2-power minion that you gave away.
Just to pop that thought experiment in your head there, Lee, there's a couple of issues. So the minion you take is one that you control, not the one that you own. So you couldn't do that on one you take, and it's destroy all minions. So even if you swapped a minion, it would still destroy the one that you swapped away.
Yeah, it's worth it.
So
it's worth it.
It's just basically an entire base sacrifice.
I love it.
Even in the dream scenario, it's a crap card. Even in the absolute dream scenario,
it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Leader 2's so boring. £6 minion game +2. All right, fine. It's what is it? It's a more powerful T-Rex, but boring.
Even if this was just a 6-power minion with no talent for me, it'd still beat Red Birthday Party. If it said nothing in the talent box, it'd still beat it for me.
I mean, I quite like Red Birthday Party as well, and I think for that kind of base reset, so as you say, you can just drop a minion, you could drop your own Leader 2 and then just completely wipe a base. it can be incredibly strong, especially where you've got no commitment and they've got a lot of commitment. You can basically put them back a lot of turns. And I completely agree with you, Lee. I think Leader 2 is a very, very boring card.
So,
I actually think King Rex is more interesting than Leader 2, and that's something of the fact that they chose not to give it an ability. I found that quite interesting, whereas they chose to give this an ability and then gave it a really boring ability. Saying that, though, it does have very good kind of synergy with the faction. Obviously, we've just seen Solar Shout, where it loses 2 power. You can use the Leader 2 to bump it back to its normal power. You can bump up your other minions as well, because they have a lot of power reduction, so Leader 2 can help them mitigate some of that power loss. So it is very boring, but it's very boring but very functional in the faction.
I have no real affinity either way. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. I really like the iconic moment like you were suggesting. The Red Birthday Party very much reflects that. If that card goes through, yeah, cool. It's nice. If the Leader 2 goes through, it's boring, but it's probably the better card, to be perfectly honest. I don't really mind either way. I am sad that I was wrong in the way that you can't, you don't gain control of that minion. I did think that when you gave a minion up and you took one back, you own that minion. But you're right. I think it has to be one of yours, doesn't it?
I think this expansion actually was where they brought out a load of clarifications around ownership and control. I think they actually had to, because we've seen the Port Me Up had own in the card as well, so they had to make it really clear about ownership and control purely because of ignobles. So I think this expansion was where they kind of brought in a lot of clarity around that.
I just think it gets in. It's just another needless mechanic that they introduced. Yeah, okay, yeah, it's a nice little experiment. It's a bit different. For anyone who's the top 1% of playing this game, probably enjoys it, but it's just not fun. It just puts another complication in the game, that learning the difference between ownership and control and flicking out the rule book and going, oh, all right, what do I do here? I just don't think it adds much to the game. I'd rather have a boring faction like Change of Bots than a overly engineered faction like Ignobles.
I think, they're obviously a love them or hate them faction, the Ignobles. I think what they've done really well is they've captured the theme of Game of Thrones incredibly well in the faction. Like,
I think that's
the complexities and the intricacies and also the kind of the stabbing in the back and all that sort of stuff and changing allegiances. I think they've captured it perfectly in the faction. I think thematically they're incredibly strong, and if we were doing like a top, the most thematic faction in Smash Up, they would certainly be up there. And cards like this, Red Birthday Party, really kind of highlight how well they've done on some of the theming and bringing out some like the key moments. But yeah, as you say, I think because of how thematic they are, they've had to introduce some new and wacky mechanics, and that maybe made them trickier to play and not as useful. And like you say, people don't necessarily like the mechanics or that sort of thing. But as I say, I think theming wise, they're incredibly strong. Probably one of my favourites, I'd say.
Theme-wise,
for me, it should be when you play this minion, it immediately dies. Boom, dead. When you play this minion, it immediately dies.
But that's not what Game of Thrones is about, is it? It's about killing them at the right time.
Game of Thrones, yeah, it's all about this guy or woman's going to do really well. Oh, she's dead. Yeah.
wait till you like this minion, and then he dies.
Yeah, exactly. Get the equivalent of like if they had like a first mate style card where it's like once this reaches a certain level of power, it dies, and like every turn it gains power. So like you're kind of watching the clock, and it's like I know it's going to die at some point soon.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Wait
write that down.
Wait till this minion has had its genitals exposed on camera. Then it dies.
Yeah. So yeah, I think are we giving it to Leader 2?
Yeah, it's the better card, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's interesting how we differed on like ranking the cards, because I had a couple on a few of these factions that we didn't put through, and
I think you and I put Red Birthday Party top, though, didn't we?
I think I've gone Hostage Exchange and Betrothed, and I maybe had Red Birthday Party in third, or one of Red Birthday Party and Betrothed were 2 and 3. But yeah, we had a lot of differences on this list compared to previous lists that we've done. So it's quite interesting to see where we differed on them. And
Here we go.
I've just seen as
Now we're
well,
talking.
we've got a countdown on the clock for Zoom, so we're probably going to have to do another meeting after this.
I can't believe
Okay.
I can't believe we've had enough to talk about to keep the Cease and Desist one going.
Yeah, we've been half
Let's
hour
get this
already.
one done.
Because Mark's been sticking up for ignobles instead of just
All
watching
the
it
time. Always fights for the underdog, does Mark.
Well, should we get this? Should we get the first rounds done and then go through another meeting?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'll start kick us off on this because it's going to be dead quick for me, and it's ship's captain all day long. I mean, Space Prince didn't even make my top 3 Astronaut cards, and we've already got Solar Shout on the other side, and it's just an objectively worse Solar Shout, and it restricts the type of actions you can play. I mean, it is quite good in the Astronauts faction, and it's good in other pairings as well, like Musketeers and Dinosaurs and factions like that, but yeah, it's just an objectively worse Solar Shout, and it's not even one of the best Astronaut cards in my opinion. But in this matchup particularly, you know, the fact that you can use Ship's Captain, already a big drop, but then you can also search for any minion at all, so that's incredibly strong. So you can search for your King Rex. There's not a lot of factions that let you search for, you know, your Big Daddy King Rex or anything else. But then as well, if it's power 3 or less, you can immediately play it, and then you can potentially combo that. So there's been plenty of times where I played Ship's Captain, got an Invader straight away, comboed it with something like, you know, Port Me Up or another card that they've got, and then played it again, for instance. So for me, it's easily Ship's Captain just because it's a big, strong card, but then as well, an incredibly versatile ability. Whereas, as I say, Space Prince, you know, we've seen it before, and a worse Solar Shout, and then, okay, it's good in the faction, it's good in certain pairings, but it's kind of mediocre for me.
Yeah, I like Ship's Captain because of the search. Like you said, there's not many cards that let you search stuff out, let alone uncapped minion. It's a search for power 2, well, you know, there's a bit of that, but search for any minion you want. You just can't argue that. Even if it didn't have the additional, play it if it was 3 or less. You can't beat that, I don't think. Especially in the Star Realms where you can pick up Ship's Captain and just get out what you want.
Yeah.
I think it's better.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I think I prefer Space Prince over the Space Knight, but I definitely think Ship Captain beats Space Prince. So it's one of those things that when you contextualise it, Mark, it's always really interesting to listen to somebody else's perspective. And I do think you've got quite a good way of being able to compare cards, and certainly you see things in a different way to what I see. You're absolutely right. When you look at Space Prince versus Solar Shout, they're the same card except Solar Shout better. Yeah, it's pointless putting Space Prince any further because Ship Captain miles better. But even in the, I think Prince is better than Knight. So just a spoiler alert, I think Solar Shout's going through the next round.
Oh, you think Prince is better than Knight though? I mean, that's in that faction. In that faction, it's a bit difficult because obviously you want power, so you probably still have Space Prince over Solar Shout just in the Astronauts alone because you probably want to keep the 2 power on Space Prince.
Yes,
and you don't necessarily.
a
lot of the actions are ones that directly increase the power, so you don't lose out a lot on the Solar Shout.
If you've never played it, the Astro Knights and the Musketeers are a hell of a combo to play, and it is really really good fun. And I remember dumping way over 16 power onto a minion and just watching Luke's face slowly sink as I was just searching deck, pulling out action, dumping out action, and just in this horrific continuous chain that I'd basically spent all game building up to. And it was so satisfying making that kind of play work. And so to me, that the Prince has more of a place on my game than the Knight does. But the Ship Captain is a better card than the Prince. We're just sort of drawing out the discussion here.
Yeah.
The catchphrase I remember from that game is you looking for about 10 cards going, I think I can break it. All right, go on then. Just give me a second. Just got to play the 8 cards later.
I just need to know the order
and then I
to
can do
put
that again.
Yeah. They are it's going to be interesting when we do the Musketeers one because they are a very kind of big brain faction to play. There's a lot of thinking and sequencing going on, similar to Ignobles really as well. They've got quite a lot of big brain plays.
Ooh, I mean the chain of the where you play and how you play the actions. I think that's the big brain part of it, isn't it? But to me, the Ignobles is it's in a different realm of its own when you're trying to like you say, the big brain faction.
If you want
nobles, ghosts, that's the tier that you're talking about there. That really, some of them are like ghosts perhaps and geek perhaps, and it's slightly easier on the face of it to sort of roll your way around. But to play them well, to play them properly, that's the big brain part.
If you want the big brain combination, it's ignobles and Anansi Tails, because you're giving away cards from your hand, but you're also giving away minions. So you got to try and work out, and you get so many extra plays from it. So you're like, oh, I'm giving away this, and I've got to remember he's got that in his hand, so I'm going to return this at this time and get this minion back, and then do this. That is the big brain, complicated faction to play, and I don't play that at the end of your session because it will make your head go all crazy. Right, so we're on to the next round then. So we've got Space Knight up against Solar Shout. And you've already kind of spoiled it a bit here, Lee, in terms of where you're going with it. So you think that Space Knight isn't even as good as Space Prince, which is surprising to hear.
I prefer Space Prince to Space Knight, personally. To me, searching the deck to try to find it, I get that you're able to potentially pick from 3 of your best actions, and you're able to draw one of those actions right there, and then potentially play it down on that turn. It's something that you would use right at the start of your turn. It's a sensible and useful talent, but like you said yourself, the goal of this particular faction is to power up. So you want to put more power down, and the Space Prince allows you to do that instantaneously on himself, or is it another minion, or is it himself? It's directly in himself, isn't it?
It's
one of your minions.
It's one of your minions.
One of your minions. So it's any of your minions that you can play that down onto as an additional action. And so, yeah, they synergize nicely. They are able to sort of assist each other with. Most of the factions have some sort of action that's going to allow the power of one minion to be increased through some vein or another. But the fact that you get to play extra actions all the time, every turn, the Solar Shout's the better card.
Interesting. I like Solar Shout. I prefer Space Knight. It's to do with the thinning out of your deck. I don't necessarily care about the extra action that I get out. So it may be that I pick the 3, I get an action that I want and I play it. But that's not really why I like it so much. It's the fact that if you take a card out, you don't draw that card in your next 2 cards. So if you're constantly able to take an extra card into your hand, you're essentially drawing 3 cards every turn. Now, yeah, there'll be some opportunities where you don't have an action to draw, but it thins your deck out, it takes you through it. It's essentially the same as some of the play on base actions that let you draw an extra card at the end of your turn. Except you can do it in your turn and potentially use that card. And that is why I think it's so strong. It's the speeding up of getting through your deck, getting to your good cards, getting to your good minions. It makes everything go faster. If you've got Solar Shout and you're playing a minion and 2 actions every turn, you're going to run out of cards unless you've got some draw, because you can't play 3 cards and draw 2 cards every turn and not run out of cards unless you've got an extra way to draw the cards. So Space Knight for me helps you get to your good cards. It makes that engine more consistent. It's like any card game that you play. We play a lot of Pokemon. If you get through your cards, if you search out the cards you want and get to the ones you do want faster, you're going to have a better time.
Yeah, this one's really close for me. It's as you mentioned, would you rather have card draw or extra plays? And it's a really tricky decision because I do love card draw, and I think you make a really valid point about Solar Shout only gives you so much value in a faction that doesn't have masses of card draw, or any card draw, I don't think, off the top of my head. So you really need a good partner faction for changer pots. If you plan on having both Solar Shouts out in play, you can maybe save up your cards and do one big combo wombo where you play down 3 actions and you break a base or something like that. But then if you're using it for ongoing value, it's quite tricky in the faction because, as I say, there's not really the inbuilt card draw engine that something like a Space Knight gives you. Whereas I really like card draw, and it's not the best card draw it could possibly be. It could be look at the top 3 and draw any card rather than just specifically actions, but it's still, as Luke mentions, you draw into an action and then you then draw into the 2 minions that you maybe know were there from having looked at the top three. So it's incredibly close for me because I'm trying to think of how good Archmage is and how close we made Archmage versus Invader. And if Invader versus Archmage was for you two Archmage winning, if I put Invader up against Solar Shout, it should be a very similar kind of level of competition there. But to me, I think
I didn't pick Archmage. I don't think over Invader.
Oh no, I think you ultimately picked Invader, but you both made it really close. you made it incredibly close, and like Invader is to me one of the best, standout best cards in the game. So if Archmage is pushing Invader, then Soul Shout would also be pushing Invader that close. And for me, then it would probably go to Solar Shout over Space Knight, although I do accept that it's incredibly close for me, and I do really like card draw, and I could probably still be convinced one way or the other on this.
Luke's argument was really quite convincing, actually. The whole idea of being able to draw through your deck, I do quite like that as a concept, and particularly, like you said, Mark, I hadn't really considered the fact that you don't have a great deal of card draw with the Change Bots, but I think it comes down to an argument that was made in probably the first video that we actually did together. I can't remember who made the argument, but 50% of this game is playing actions, and what this allows you to do is to play that extra part of this game over and over again every single time. So you're playing 1.5 turns on somebody else, and to me that is more valuable than being able to draw an additional card. Especially when there are ways for you to be able to draw additional cards consistently. So one of the actions that you've got in, I don't know, Truckers, for example, allows you to put something on a base where you get extra card draw, or Plants, where you get extra card draw. There's lots of other factions that have lots of other card draw, but very few factions have play an extra action every single turn.
Yeah, my argument for that is you do need the draw, like you said, but the Space Knight gives you more choices. So the Solar Shout, you might only have 2 actions in your hand, and you might play both, or it might not be the right time to play one. But Space Knight would mean that you would have an extra action. You did have the choice between 3 cards. And then, you only play 1, but you have the choice of 3, so you can play the best one of the 3.
Yeah, you're picking the best case scenario versus a worst case scenario, aren't you? It's a super argument. I mean, it's a fair way of doing it. But you may have a situation where you've got 4 amazing actions to play in a big chain, and the Solar Shout will allow you to get that chain started. Or you may be in a position where you've got 3 minions and you don't draw anything, and therefore it's completely worthless. We can both make the same argument and the converse of each other's arguments. It's like you said, I'm sort of happy either way. I'm happy with whichever one it is that we decide to choose. But I think Solar Shout's a better card based on the arguments made previously with Archmage.
I think it's Mark's deciding vote then.
I think I'm just thinking about pairings, and I know for me, one of the like smoothest and even one of the best pairings I think in the game is Astronite Grannies, because Grannies have an incredibly strong draw engine, and if you have the Matriarch and the Space Knight in play and your 2 Grandmas, you can basically stack the top of the deck for all actions and stack the bottom of the deck for all minions, and you draw the bottom of the deck for minions with the Matriarch and draw the top through with Space Knight and draw all your actions. The speed in which you draw through your deck there is just incredible. But I think I would probably ultimately agree with Lee here and going with Solar Shout, because although Space Knight is card draw and I like card draw, and you need Space Knight really to enable Solar Shout, as you say, it not just means you can play more than half the game, it enables combos that you couldn't or might not be able to do. Like, if you think Giant Ants got a Titan to play an extra action because they need an extra action play to make their combo like really, really strong, like game-breakingly strong. Whereas they can't do that within the faction itself. They need something else, and something like Solar Shout, you can put it with the Giant Ants, and then you can enable that combo for them, so it just helps to bring out the potential power of other factions as well, which Space Knight doesn't do, but Space Knight is also very good for drawing through the deck, as you say, and thinning out a particular type of card, and especially with Grannies, like, that's just unbelievable. If you want a smooth card draw engine, Astronite Grannies is definitely where you go for that. But as I say, I think I would give it to Solar Shout as well.
I think one thing that we probably concluded between us when we've been going through this is that we should probably try Change Bots with a few other combinations. I think
when you mentioned ants there, actually, I'm starting to think.
Yeah.
Actually, be quite curious to play that just to see how that synergizes. But you're right, I am trying to think of a faction that I'd like to play Change of Bots with. In fact, I think I've played them maybe twice ever, if that. They've never really appealed to me as a faction, but as we were going through the cards, nothing really jumped out to make me think I was even really remotely keen on playing them. But we've seen that actually, we're comparing this card to Archmage. There's one of them in the Mages faction. There's two of them in this one, and you get a Kingling as well. So
yeah, and as well, when we were talking about ranking the cards, you've got Change Up and Roll On, which is a worse full sale. And generally what Changerbot seem to do is they give you worse versions of really good cards, like really broken cards, but then they all mash them all into one faction. So you've got a lot of broken cards which they kind of balance with power reduction. So, yeah, I mean, I think, again, this expansion just seems to be full of like really polarizing factions. And again, I think I agree with you. I don't really particularly like playing Changerbots, but they do have some interesting pairings and, some good pairings which they can help to enable through Solar Shout.
My goodness, are we going to get a Solar Shout Leader 2 final? That's going to be interesting.
You think Leader
2?
And
I'd be interested to play Astronauts with Changerbots as well because of what Mark said earlier.
About
you're losing to power, but then you can regain it with your adding your power and the card draw thing. So I think I'm definitely going to try them. If you accept them as what they look like, which is more of a support faction than a standalone faction, then I think they might get a bit better in my eyes.
Which one, Changerbots or Astronauts?
Changerbots.
We've spent all week basically saying this is going to be really quick and really easy, and we're just going to be able to talk through it. And actually, having talked through it together, we've been able to determine that there's actually several combinations that we're interested in having to go away and have a little play with. So,
very good. Right, so we're on the semi-final for the other side now. So Leader 2 up against Ship's Captain. So shall I kick this one off? I think it's. I mean, we've talked a lot about both of them already, and for me, I'll just go out and say it. For me, it's Ship's Captain again, just because. Okay, it's not a talent, but the on-play ability is very, very strong. It combos well in that particular faction, but it also is something that any faction would appreciate, is the ability to search for any single minion, the minion you need for that specific situation, or the minion you need, so like maybe search for a Shinobi, for instance, and put it into your hand for the base to break. Or, as I say, you play with the aliens and you get the invader out the deck and play it straight away and pick it back up. It just gives you such versatility that I think for me I'd always go with the Ship's Captain. Whereas, okay, Leader 2 is good. It's just, I'd probably say Leader 2 is just solid. Like, it's just a really solid, very boring but very solid 6 power drop with a decent talent, ongoing ability throughout. It's pretty boring from a play point of view. It doesn't really give you. I think that the thing with Ship's Captain is it gives you more choice. It gives you, what's the optimal play in this situation. Whereas Leader 2 is just, okay, which minion needs the +2 power this turn. That's really as complicated as it gets. Whereas Ship's Captain gives you that kind of potential for making the optimal play and getting the best minion for that situation, or maybe even thinking a couple of turns in advance and going, okay, I need this specific minion for a few turns time, and this might happen on this base over here. Let me help tutor that situation and tutor my deck and get that specific minion out. So I think for me it goes to Ship's Captain, just because, as Luke mentioned earlier on as well, you can actually pick up the Ship's Captain and play it again and search for another minion. So you can get more ongoing value from that faction, but it is just a good card in general. So is Leader 2 in fairness, but for me it's just a bit boring and it's just solid. It's not exciting. I don't think it's a very exciting card.
Interesting, this, isn't it? Because Leader 2 will help you break a base more directly. I know Ship's Captain will probably indirectly, but once you've played it down, it's sort of you gone and it's used its 5 power. But the interesting thing here is that if Ship's Captain was an action, it'd be one of the best actions in the game. And the fact that it uses up your 5 power minion is sort of keeping it a bit in check, but also making it quite powerful. If that makes sense. But it's a very strong card to be able to search out. Leader 2 is essentially going to give you 8 power on a base that you're going to try and break. But ship's captain can do that by searching out a minion of power 3 or less and then playing it straight down and then getting that minion's on playability. So I think that alone means they'd easily the two.
I think you're right in what you're saying. I'd almost rather have that talent, that ability, that play ability on its own card, and play it as an action rather than have it on the 5 and then have it there as something else. But I think you're right. The fact that you also get 5 power with that, it makes it really powerful. To me, yeah, it's ship's captain versus it. So I think it's perfectly fair comparison. And I think it was just boring. It's just boring. I just wish it did something else. Like even the Bear Cavalry 6 minion does something that's quite fancy. Like why does this get 6 power and then just be really boring?
Yeah. As I say, I've been thinking Rex is more interesting than this. The fact that it doesn't have an ability makes it quite interesting.
Plus the innate, there's something about that 7. It's just powerful. Big Daddy King Rex. I like it.
I mean, and it's the art as well. Like we love that King Rex art. Whereas, okay, it's quite funny that it transforms into an RV, but it's quite it's just the whole thing about the Changerbots faction. It just seems like really bland. Like everything just kind of there's no like bright, vibrant colours on the card or anything like that. It just seems really, really bland. I'm
frustrated that they've taken Transformers and made it boring. Transformers is not boring. It's like your PS5 turning into something really cool. That's I mean, that's what PS5 is really cool, isn't it? But a robot. It's a robot.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's more then.
They had to give them something to change to. And all they've really done is make them move about and lose a bit of power and gain a bit of power. But
move on.
They could have made them really change into something good.
They've got a lot of, as you say, they've got a lot of movement cards, but
the problem is
it helps to mitigate some of the power drops that the faction has. They could have done something a bit more. They didn't need that many cards that move around. They needed some, as you say, a bit more versatility in what their changing effects do.
The problem is they spent all their time working on the idea of the ignobles, and they must have got bored when it came around to looking at Transformers, because all that effort on making the art and everything beautiful for ignobles and Transformers just get a fairly boring mechanic. But yeah, you're right.
It's the same with, I mean, just looking at the art on that, it's the same with Solar Show. It's like if you look at the art that's gone into Ship's Captain compared to that, it's just a really. They've just gone for like a really boring faction. As you say, they've made Transformers, which I've never seen, but as you say, it's like explosions and fighting robots and all that sort of stuff. And then they've just made it.
At one point, one of the Transformers films, and they're worth watching, by the way. They're really good.
They're great, yeah.
There is a moment where I don't want to spoil too much for everybody, but there's a moment where the main Transformer guy rides on the back of a giant Transformer T-Rex. And it's one of the coolest things in any film you've ever seen in your life. So
I honestly can't believe they built all those dinosaurs.
It's fantastic.
It is, and he's got a massive sword that he swings around as well.
It's worth it just for that.
Top quality entertainment.
And then what they've done with this is they've made them all really weak. Like when they transform, they lose power. That's kind of what the theme they've gone with. For this one, I mean, I get the theme, but it's just boring.
He was riding on that dinosaur. He looked pretty powerful to me.
Right, so we're in the final then. So we've got Solar Shout up against Ship's Captain. So if we were to say which one of these would go through to, the Champion of Champions tournament, which are we going to?
If you'd asked me yesterday, I'd have pretty much laughed, because I would never have thought that a Changerbots card would have got anywhere near the final in this. I was kind of laughably insisting that they were as bad as the Ignobles in terms of the best cards in the deck. But the more and more we've unpicked this, the more and more we've talked about how Solar Shout is essentially a poor man's Archmage. And alright, Ship's Captain is great, but maybe I'm the worst person to start this off with, because I don't really have an idea in my own head. It's really interesting to me that I've warmed as much as I have done towards Solar Shout.
I think you become a real Changerbots fanboy.
I have. I need to play them. I definitely need to play them more.
You've changed.
I'll edit that one out, don't worry.
put a laugh track on it. Because I if for the reasons I've said already, I like Solo Shout. I like the extra action play. I I don't like how it sits in the faction without any good actions to play with, but you can't deny that playing the extra action every turn is strong, and the -2 power is basically irrelevant in most circumstances, apart from being able to destroy it and the odd thing like that. But that expires at the end of your turn anyway, so it's basically an Archmage. I do prefer Ship's Captain because it's uncapped searching. Okay, yeah, it's limited to being a minion, but you can get any minion you want out. And being able to very quickly and easily get your 2 power 5s or your power 6 or whatever your other king minion is. Have both your king minions on the board within, in theory, the first 2 turns of the game, or even the first turn if you've got an extra minion play anywhere. You can't deny how powerful that is. I think as well, there's a lot of good power 3 and power 2 minions that would enjoy being played on the same turn. And dropping a quick power 8 with an extra ability and searching out from your deck, it's just very versatile, very useful. Being able to pick Ship's Captain up within its faction is very strong as well. Replay him again and search them out, and that ability is just so useful.
A Mimic?
Yeah, pull out a Mimic, get 10 power on the board in 1 turn. Pick the Ship's Captain up again, do it next time. I don't think there's a real limit to what Ship's Captain can do as long as you're playing with another good partner. Even some of his turn minions are pretty good and do a good job at. I think you are aiming for your partner faction when you do this. There are some good minions within your faction, but I think you probably do hunt out whatever you've chosen to pair with this and get picked up or get moved or however you play them. So I think Ship's Captain wins it for me.
It sounds almost like you're saying that it's basically an instant play Madman Citizen.
Maybe it is. I can't think of a good comeback to that. If Madman Citizen was play me down and then go search out power 5 minion, it'd be the best card in the game. But you have to wait a turn and then destroy it, and that lets it down. But if you could play the 2 to instantly go get a 5, which is basically what this is, or very similar anyway.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll give you my 2 cents then, and then because I was thinking about it as Luke was talking, and then Mark can come in with the deciding vote, because I think I'm going to give my final vote to Solar Shout. And the reason for that is I'm trying to compare these 2 cards face to face. I think either are worthy, and if Ship's Captain ends up taking it, then I'm not actually that upset. I'm so sort of torn. It's about as close as I've ever come within any of these discussions to really suggesting that either of these cards is probably good enough to win. I think what's got it for me is that comparison to Archmage that I completely overlooked, to be perfectly honest, until we really started delving into it. And my sort of feelings towards how powerful Archmage was, the fact that it gave Invader a really good run for its money. And I think that comes down to me of the additional action play every single turn. The simple fact that you can play an extra action every single play makes it the more powerful card, in my opinion. Now, the caveat to that is, of course, that you do get to use Ship's Captain to be able to search out anything that you want to be able to play that down. But for me, it's the power of the individual cards. Forgetting for a minute anything else to do with the faction that you would pair them with, or any of the other cards in the faction, or any of the mechanics that are in the faction. If we just look just purely at the face value of these 2 cards, if you were making a best of faction, and I think I said earlier on that Solar Shout wouldn't make it. Actually, I might have changed my mind. It might end up making one of the best of. You could probably put either of these things in, but again, it just, to me, it comes right back down to I want to play more of my game, and Solar Shout lets me do that every single turn. Ship's Captain is 1 use, 1 card, put it down, and off you go. But you also are able to search out a Solar Shout with a Ship's Captain, so you're able to get your engine kind of going either way. As I say, to me, I'm kind of I'm sort of 50-50 on really either of them, but I'm falling more towards the Solar Shout just because I like the idea of being able to control my own action plays and more of them.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think ship's captain gets. I think it depends on how you play as well. I was just thinking about this when you were both speaking. If we were playing, like if the three of us were sitting down and we're playing, really sweaty smash up, and we're doing proper drafting, and okay, Lee's picked this, so if I pick this, I need to pick this to counter, that pick kind of thing. If we're playing really sweaty, then ship's captain gets even better because actually you can tutor out the specific counter card to one of your picks maybe, whatever that might be. So the fact that you can search for that specific thing in that particular matchup makes ship's captain even better. I think if you're playing casually though and you just pick random pairings, then ship's captain suffers because of that. Whereas I think actually for me it's quite cut and dry really. As much as as I like ship's captain, and I think it's personally for me it's I prefer the card, although in this context I don't think it's as good. It would go to Solar Shout, and that really comes down to the last round that Solar Shout was in. Because if we're saying that Solar Shout's better than Space Knight, I actually think Space Knight is probably better than Ship's Captain. So for me, it would be quite an easy, straightforward win for Solar Shout in this matchup. And the reason, I can see both like puzzle. The reason I think Space Knight is better than Ship's Captain is just because it's a talent. You can just keep on doing it over and over again. And as Luke was saying, you draw through your deck quickly, and you can actually get to your better minions quicker through Space Knight. Whereas Ship's Captain lets you get to one minion immediately, Space Knight lets you get to more minions quicker than Ship's Captain would in general. So I'd say Soul Shout wins this, and it's more like 75-25 even, as much as I prefer Ship's Captain. It's quite cut and dry this, just because I think Space Knight is better than Ship's Captain, and if Solar Shout beats Space Knight, then it has to win this, I think.
Well, just for the record, I did say Space Knight was better than Silver Shout. So if we're now going back to saying that it's better than Ship's Captain, I do think Space Knight is better than Silver Shout.
No, I still think Solar Shout is better than Space Knight. I think Space Knight against Ship's Captain would probably like 55-45 to Space Knight.
I genuinely would never have guessed that a Changer Bot card would come close to winning this. I do feel better that I put Solar Shout down as my number one choice at least, out of all of them. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with Solar Shout winning. You've convinced me. You've convinced me. It's the better card.
I mean, I actually, yeah, as you say, I think it surprised me as well. Because I actually think the best Changer Bot cards isn't even on the slide. I think it's Change Up and Roll On, which is Full Sail. But that's because I think Full Sail is better than Archmage. But yeah, it's a surprising win.
So we're concluding that Solar Shout's better than Ship's Captain.
I would say so.
Yes.
Oh, bloody hell.
Don't forget.
I feel like I've lost too many of these ones.
I prefer Ship's Captain, but I can't deny that if Solar Shout beats Space Knight, then it should really beat Ship's Captain as well.
We're looking for the best card, aren't we? And whilst Ship's Captain might fall better into your play style or might fall better into a situational thing, Solar Shout is the better card. It's got the talent that you use all the time that allows you to play extra actions. There's very little you can really argue with that. Prove me wrong, comment section.
And yeah, as you say, I mean,
the faction itself is not good enough to support the ability to play an extra action.
We're looking for the best card. If you were building your own
Ship's Captain's still better.
Cards. It's not though.
Yeah, it is.
Look, it's not in the champion slot. You can see that.
I think, I mean, I agree. I think Solar Shout is a great support card for your partner faction. You do get some value from the Changer Bot, being able to play an extra Changer Bot action here or there, but you're playing into your partner faction as well quite heavily with this card. But it's not just, okay, Ship's Captain is probably better in Star Owners than Solar Shout is in Changer Bots, but Solar Shout is way better in other factions than Ship's Captain is in other factions. Although Ship's Captain is good, and most factions would like it, I think more factions would appreciate Solar Shout.
Ship's Captain can let you instantly guarantee that you play your King minions and get the maximum value out of both your King minions.
True, I don't disagree. But if you think about those factions that can't do their big power play, so I think Dinosaur Changer Bots, for instance, like you can play if you have your Solar Shout and your Leader 2 in play, you can play down your King Rex, Leader 2 the King Rex, Augmentation the King Rex, and then Rampage to break a 26 power base with just one minion. So like it gives you stuff like that. It gives factions combo wombo stuff that they couldn't normally do. And I think, as I say, it's just Archmage, and I still remember.
Well, hang on. If we're doing fancy wordplay here, you could get your ship's captain. Oh, I can't be bothered to think of a combination, but you could
because
get
you've lost again. You've lost.
No.
You've become the leader of Smash Up.
All right. Okay, let me think about something. So,
it's too late now. We're finished.
if you had an action in your hand to play an extra minion, you could play your ship's captain. You could get your king minion out. I haven't decided which one yet, but a really good one. Play it down.
What was that?
You could ship's captain for Archmage and have an absolute party. You could ship's captain.
You could ship's captain for
Solar
Shout, yeah.
Yeah, you could, and have a party.
I think
then play an action to pick him back up, and you could constantly cycle it.
You could play ship's captain to get your alien king minion. I can't remember what it's called. You play the alien king minion. No, it's not the Invader. It's the Supreme Overlord. You play ship's captain, get your Supreme Overlord. You play your Supreme Overlord. You pick up your ship's captain. You play down your ship's captain to get your Invader. That's like the long-winded one. I suppose.
Yeah. If you were on my side, you'd have made that argument for me, but I can't think of it.
The absolute best ship's captain play, right, is you play ship's captain, you get your Invader, you play it straight away. You use the other Star Roamers card, I can't remember what it's called, where you can pick up one of your minions and play down any minions from hand that have the same name. So you pick up your Invader, you play down 2 Invaders from hand, and you score 3 victory points off your ship's captain play. That's like the dream. That is as good as it gets with ship's captain.
Yeah, you're right, but the ship's captain didn't do that. The Invaders did that.
No, but think about how powerful it is in Aliens to get your Invaders out early.
Yeah.
And you want to be cycling them every time. It's true for any powerful card. Most factions have a card that you want to get out early and keep out as long as possible.
Yeah, Solar Shout.
In most, it's your king minions, but it's so important to be able to get your Invaders out early. And there's very few search cards within Smash Up to just go and get whatever card you want.
The quicker,
there are
with
no
Aliens.
other cards in the game that allow you to play an extra action every single turn.
With Aliens.
But I'd rather have my Invader turn 1.
Yeah, with Aliens, the quicker you get the Invader, the higher the win rate for Aliens goes up. Are we happy with that? Yeah?
No, we are not. You're talking about how good Invader is again. That's what you're doing.
No,
I'm just
I'm
projecting
talking
Invader
about
onto ship's captain.
How powerful the ability to go get
Okay.
your best minion from the combination you play.
But your mild-mannered citizen can do that.
No.
No, it can, though.
I'm getting...
You can't get Invader.
Tell me I'm wrong.
It can't get Invader. It can only get power 5, can't it? It can't get up to power 5.
Up to power 5.
I'm getting I'm
Is
getting flashbacks.
Is it up to power 5 or is it power 5?
Up to power 5.
Right.
I'm getting. I think it's up to power 5. Yeah. Oh no, I think it might be 5 or higher. I think it's 5 or higher, maybe.
Right, so you can only get a 5 then.
I'm sure it's not 5. I'm sure it's not 5 or higher. We need to look this up.
Yeah, let me look it up. But I'm getting serious flashbacks here. We're literally repeating Archmage versus Invader. I'm getting like flashbacks of that. I'm just projecting the two of them onto each other.
But Sprout can get an Invader out.
Yeah, of course.
The Sprout is not the best card in the game. The Sprout is not the best card in the faction.
No, but a Sprout can also go get King Rex or Doppelganger or the other good Mad Scientist one.
Just about as good.
Yeah, it's power 5 or more.
Is it really?
Yeah, power 5 or more.
So there goes flush the toilet on my Man Citizen again.
I mean, to be fair, it's no great loss. I was just trying to make a point.
Can't even go get an Invader.
Right, we've got 5 minutes left on the Zoom call, so to save doing
it's
another
fine.
one.
Already wrapped it up.
Yeah.
Is it done?
Yeah.
Am I out?
Solo shout goes through to the Champions tournament. You can argue against it there, Luke. We can have. I'll put a solo shout up against Invader in the first round, and we can do it all over again. A core set discussion. But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there, and we'll say solo shout has won it. So
I can't wait for the comment section to tell me I'm wrong again.
Well, we'll have to see what they say. See what who disagrees with us on this decision.
Well, obviously, like and subscribe. I don't care.
Like and subscribe. Yeah. But yeah, I think we've done it. So thank you very much, guys, for joining me again on this one. We thought it'd be quite a short one. We thought like 40 minutes or less, but we've ended up discussing it more than we thought we would have done. So
I think what we've realised is even if we think most of the cards are bad, we still like to debate them and say why one is worse than the other.
And I really like that, and hopefully other people like it as well, because we get to, people have their favourite cards or whatever, we at least give them a fighting chance. We're at least arguing the corner for them. So,
well, apart from Bar-Mannered Citizen,
I stood up for it. I gave it a fair hearing. But yeah, I think with that being said, I think we'll wrap it up there, and it just gives us a couple of minutes to talk about the next one that we want to do. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching it, and thank you again for joining us on this one.
Next time.